In other words, what we're doing is drawing together spiritual resources that stand us in good stead when crises occur in our lives. And today, appropriately, we're going to deal with the gift or the ark of freedom. Galatians 5:1, if the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. Free of bad habits, free of bad attitudes, free of any bondage that may beset us because of the influence of other people or the spiritual influence of Satan himself. If the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. We're going to draw on Luke, the 13th chapter, verses 10 through 17. Now he, Jesus, was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman who had had a disabling spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are free from your disability." And he laid hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and she glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the people, "There are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed, not on the Sabbath day." Then the Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, do not each of you on the Sabbath by someone else." They don't feel that they have permission to take charge of their own lives. So they wait around for someone else out there somewhere to give them permission. Permission to live. Permission to change something in their life that ought to be changed. And permission to do something creative or take charge of their lives. In Luke the 13th chapter, Jesus sees a woman in the synagogue who had been bent over, bent double for 18 years. And it was some spiritual burden had taken hold of her. She had been unable to stand straight for over 18 years, and Jesus had compassion for her, and he gives her permission to put the problem behind her. You are rid of your trouble. Is another way to translate what Jesus said to her. And so she straightened up and praised God. Now that's wonderful, isn't it? What a great, great victory in this story. But why did she have to wait 18 years? Why didn't someone give her permission earlier to throw off this burden? Why didn't she give herself permission? Why did she resign herself to this awful plight? And why do we wait around for permission to throw off burdens that crush us through the course of our lives? Bent over double, this woman was dominated by a spirit that had gripped her and shackled her for almost 20 years. For all that time, she had not been able to stand up straight because she was so ashamed, so guilt-ridden, so worn down, so burdened, so humiliated. Then Jesus happened along, and perceptive, he saw straight into the core of her problem. And he told her to put it behind her. In effect, he gave her permission to straighten up. And that's what she did. Don't miss something very important in this story, namely that this person's problem was spiritual. Usually when Jesus' miracles are recorded, it's about a physical disability or a physical disease. But this was spiritual. In this story, well, the woman is bent double because of something that's gone wrong spiritually. In the original Greek text, it's called a spirit. She has a spirit of weakness. Don't you wish that the writer would have given us a little bit more information so that we could have been a little bit more aware of the details? The question is, how did she get involved? And how did she get doubled over like this? How did she become so spiritually burdened that she couldn't straighten up? Was it some public scandal that left her stooped in shame? Or had she been caught in some sordid sin that had left her doubled over in humiliation? Or had she done something so terrible that people around her steered clear because of the fear of guilt by association? Had her past been so disgraceful that it had burdened her to the point where she was bent over with guilt? We don't know. The scriptures don't tell us. The scriptures only give us the bottom line. Namely, when Jesus said, "You are set free from your ailment," that's all she needed. That's all she needed. When he assured her that she was forgiven, it set her free from the awful burden that had been pushing her down for so many years. Jesus saying it miraculously made it feel all right for her to stand tall. Jesus saying it miraculously made it feel all right for her to put it behind her and to accept God's forgiveness. Jesus saying it miraculously made it all right to forgive herself and to pick up the pieces of her life and to start all over again. End of story. Right? Happy ending. Everybody lived happily ever after. Not so. Not quite. Instead, the leader of the synagogue is angry, vindictive, and he's aggressive because Jesus healed a woman on the Sabbath. Now see here, he said, you've broken the law. Look what you've done. You've healed someone on the Sabbath. You've forgiven someone on this holy day. You've given someone a new lease on life on the Lord's day. This is unheard of. It's unspeakable. The people have 6 days to find healing. Why did you have to help this woman on the Sabbath? Doesn't seem logical, does it? His argument. Jesus answered, in effect, look what has happened to us. Can't you see? Are we perfectly willing to help an animal on the Sabbath, but not a person? Is it okay to bring comfort to an ox or a donkey on the Sabbath, but not a human being? How ridiculous is that? The church is not here to abuse people. The church is here to bring healing and forgiveness and not to lay more guilt on people. It's not fitting to help this woman. Is it not fitting to help this woman who's been burdened for 18 years? 18 years is long enough. One more day is too long. Then the people rejoiced in what Jesus said and for what he had done. It's a great story. And it sounds at its first hearing as though, well, that's something that happened back in Jesus' day, but it really isn't relevant for us today. But look closer. The permission syndrome is still very alive and well among us in this day. The woman was resigned to her plight until Jesus came along and gave her permission to be well, to be okay. Gave her permission to start over. Gave her permission to live again. And that permission constituted freedom. Freedom to do those things. And that permission problem is still with us. Crazy it may sound, it is a lot more common than we think. Look at the red flag statements that sometimes we hear from people. We never did it that way before. No one will tell me what to do. Or this one. I want to change my life, but no one will really tell me how to change it. Or I can't do that. There's no way I can take that risk. I might fail. And so on and so on. So we wait for permission. We wait for somebody, some law, some authority, something, some rationale from outside, some fortunate change in circumstance that will say to us that it's okay and that we're free to do or to move or to be that which for some strange reason we don't feel permission. We have permission to do or be on our own. We wait for permission to live. And Jesus gives us the freedom to do just that. This reminds us of part of the good news of Christ, and that is he sets us free. He unshackles us. He relieves our burdens. He forgives us. He encourages us. He challenges us. He inspires us. And he saves us. In other words, he gives us permission or the freedom to live, really to live life. Let me show you what I mean by 3 quick examples. First of all, Christ gives us the freedom, the permission to stand tall for what is right. The woman in Luke the 13th chapter had been bent over for 18 years, and for 18 years, no one had helped her. The people didn't realize that they could. They didn't realize that that's what it means to be the church. They were waiting for someone else to do it. And so in Luke the 13th chapter, Jesus fulfilled that role. He literally became the church. He changed a bit. bad situation. He brought forgiveness and healing and life and peace to a troubled soul. And in so doing, he gave us permission and the freedom to be agents of that kind of ministry. He stood tall for what was right, and we have the freedom and also the call to do the same thing. The time has come for us to stand tall in support of our American culture, in support of our American history, in support of the freedoms that we've taken for granted for so long. Do you realize the dramatic changes that have taken place on many of our most prestigious college campuses here in America? Education through free expression and the exchange of ideas and alternative points of view is no longer accepted. 1,000 illegals have crossed the border just in the month of May alone. Estimates reveal that here in 2021, from January till July in 2021, upwards of 700,000 illegals have crossed the southern border and are now in our country. Folks, fellow Americans, there is a time when we must stand tall for what is right, and that time is now. Secondly, Christ gives us permission to forgive. Jesus introduced grace and mercy and forgiveness into the law in a fresh new way. The law of the day back then was the law of retribution. In other words, if you did something bad to me, I am obligated to do something bad or even worse to you. Not only retribution, but revenge was the name of the game. Also, another distorted notion running rampant was the belief that if a person is sick or afflicted, then that is God's judgment on them, and we don't want to tamper or interfere with God's judgment. So we let them go. We don't tamper with God's judgment, and so they shun people who were troubled or sick or infirm. In other words, and here's the point: in the time of Jesus, the commonly accepted understanding was, I don't have a choice to forgive. I must repay you an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Let God's justice and judgment be served. But then Jesus came, and he didn't shun people. He didn't separate himself from people. He loved them, and he granted freedom and permission to forgive. Remember how he was criticized. Wait a minute, said the people. Only God can forgive. But Jesus said, no, you can forgive too. We all can forgive. In fact, we do. We also have permission to forgive ourselves. We all make mistakes, but we can learn from our mistakes and grow from them and forgive ourselves, and with the help of God, make a comeback. In this great story in Luke 13, Jesus reminds us that we have permission to stand tall. We have the freedom to stand tall for what is right. We have the permission and the freedom to forgive. And thirdly, Christ gives us the permission and the freedom to start over again, to bounce back, to make a comeback, to pick up the pieces of our lives and make a new start. Simon Peter realized that, and that was what he glorified God for the rest of his life. But Judas didn't realize that and paid the price. The woman in Luke 13 was resigned to her burdened state, but Jesus came into her life and gave her the freedom to start over again. Isn't it interesting? Today, we really celebrate when someone makes a beginning, when someone starts something new. But really, we ought to be really celebrating when people begin again, when people start again. The greatest moments come when we, not when we start out, but when we start over. Over the years, there's been great excitement in the eyes of people who are making a new start with their lives. And this is good news. The good news of our faith is that God has a new beginning, a new chance, a new start, a new life for us. God offers us new opportunities and then gives us the strength to grab hold of them and celebrate them. No matter what has happened in the past, no matter how many years you've been under, no matter how many years we have under our belts, no matter how many bad mistakes we've made along the way, it's never too late to start again. Why is this? because our God is the God of resurrection, who can turn sorrow into joy, problems into opportunities, defeats into victories, and death into life. And also because he gives us the freedom to live, really live. He gives us the freedom to stand tall for what is right, the freedom to fight, forgive one another, and he gives us permission and the freedom when we stumble and fall to get up and start all over again. Praise be to God. Let us turn to him in prayer. Lord, how we thank you for the table of the Lord. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to unite with you and with each other. And Lord,